title. Doctors failed her, but a farmer's whisper worked a miracle. She lay still, her fragile body dwarfed by the sterile white hospital bed. A maze of tubes and wires, tethering her to blinking machines that spoke in anxious beeps. Her mother clutched her small hand with fingers that trembled from days of exhaustion, her eyes hollow from watching her daughter slip further away with every passing hour. Doctors hovered nearby like defeated ghosts, their once hopeful faces now painted with resignation. "We've done all we could," they had said that morning, voices clipped and clinical. But the heart of a mother doesn't stop hoping, and neither does the soul of a stranger who believes in miracles. That stranger came not in a white coat, but in mud-caked boots, smelling of earth and rain, with calloused hands and eyes that had seen many seasons come and go. He didn't offer medicine. He offered a whisper. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen miracles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to USA Soul Stories. Every click helps stories like these reach the hearts that need them most. It began 6 weeks earlier, in a quiet corner of Kansas, where the sun hung low over golden fields and life moved to the rhythm of soil, seed, and sweat. Elena was only 9 years old, a bright little spark with a laugh that could make even grumpy store clerks smile. Her mother, Rosa, had moved with her to the countryside in search of peace after a bitter divorce. They didn't have much, just a rented trailer, an old Chevy, and each other. But they were content. Elena had a knack for making friends with animals, wildflowers, and even the wind. She would talk to trees like they were old friends, and twirl under the sky like she was dancing with invisible angels. Then, one morning, Rosa found her daughter curled up on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow. At first, the doctors thought it was a viral infection, something that would pass. But it didn't. Elena's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her muscles weakened. She couldn't walk without falling. Her voice grew slurred, then vanished. By the second week, she was no longer responding to touch or sound. They were moved from one hospital to another. Big city neurologists ran endless tests. MRI scans, spinal taps, genetic screenings, all came back inconclusive. It was as if her body was shutting down, piece by piece, without reason. Rosa sat beside her daughter every day, reading to her, humming lullabies, begging God to take her instead. Nurses avoided eye contact. Specialists spoke in hushed tones. One even suggested preparing for end-of-life care. It was during a rare moment of clarity, while sipping lukewarm coffee in the hospital garden, that Rosa met him. He was a stranger, tall and weathered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a faded shirt that smelled faintly of hay. He sat down beside her on the bench without asking and offered a jar of wild honey. "For strength," he said simply. Rosa tried to smile politely, but was too numb to respond. Still, something about the gentleness in his voice made her look at him longer. His name was Jacob, a farmer from the nearby valley, known by locals as the Whisperer. They said he had a gift, not of healing exactly, but of knowing. Knowing when a seed would sprout, knowing when a storm was about to hit, and sometimes knowing when a soul was still reachable. Jacob listened quietly as Rosa poured out her heartbreak. She didn't expect him to understand the medical terms or the crushing weight of helplessness. But he did something no doctor had done. He asked if he could meet Elena. Not to fix her, he added, but to see her, truly see her. The next day, Jacob came to the hospital. The nurses raised their eyebrows, but didn't object, perhaps out of pity, or maybe hope. He entered the room, removed his hat, and stood by the girl's bedside. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, like one might gaze at a beloved old tree, struck by lightning saddened. but with reverence. Asterisk. Then he leaned in close, and in the softest voice, he whispered something. No one heard what he said, not the nurses, not Rosa. It lasted barely a few seconds. Then he straightened, touched her forehead gently with the back of his hand, and left without another word. Asterisk. Rosa wept that night, not because anything had changed, but because someone had treated her daughter like she was still there. Asterisk. But the change came the next morning. Asterisk. The nurse was adjusting the four when she dropped her clipboard and screamed. Rosa rushed in, heart pounding. Elena's fingers had moved. Slowly, weakly, but they had moved. Over the next hour, she began blinking more deliberately, then followed a flashlight with her eyes. By evening, she could squeeze her mother's hand. Asterisk. The hospital turned upside down. Doctors came in waves, baffled but excited. They couldn't explain it. Her scans were still inconclusive. Nothing had been administered, no new treatment introduced, but her vitals were stabilizing. Her lungs were stronger. The machines beeped with new rhythm, hopeful, alive. Asterisk. In 3 days, she whispered her first word, Mama. By the following week, she sat up with help. 2 weeks later, she took 3 trembling steps into her mother's arms. Asterisk. Rosa tried to find Jacob, to thank him, to understand what had happened. But he was gone. A number he had left behind led to a disconnected line. She drove out to the valley where he said he farmed, but no one there knew a Jacob matching his description. An old woman at a roadside fruit stand looked puzzled. That name hasn't been heard in years, she said slowly. There was a Jacob who lived here once. Gentle soul. Passed away 10 years ago. Rosa stood silent, the wind brushing her cheeks like a soft goodbye. She never found him again. But Elena's recovery continued. Her speech returned. Her legs grew stronger. The girl who once danced with the wind began to laugh again. This time with a voice more vibrant than ever before. The doctors called it a spontaneous neurological reversal, an outcome so rare it was nearly unrecorded. But Rosa knew it wasn't just that. It wasn't spontaneous. It was grace. Asterisk. Every year now, on the same day Jacob visited, they returned to that garden. Elena, now a teenager, brings fresh flowers and a small jar of honey. They sit on the bench and whisper thank yous to the wind. Asterisk. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to USA Soul Stories to keep these real emotional journeys alive. Asterisk special. Request. Tell us in the comments, do you believe miracles come in quiet whispers too? Certainly. Here's an emotionally extended continuation of the story, maintaining the same cinematic, heart-touching tone with vivid storytelling and gradual emotional pacing to suit a full-length 6,000-word YouTube video. Rosa never looked at life the same way after that. Something had shifted in her, not just in the way she saw Elena's recovery, but in how she perceived time, people, even silence. Before, she used to pray in desperation. Now, she prayed in gratitude. She didn't have the answers, and maybe she never would. But the very mystery of it, that quiet, inexplicable moment when a stranger whispered something and changed everything, was enough to transform her entire view of the world. Asterisk. The hospital staff marveled at Elena's recovery, but they eventually moved on to other cases, other tragedies. For them, it became an anecdote, a medical anomaly. But for Rosa and Elena, it became the center of their personal faith. Rosa left her job as a cashier and started volunteering at pediatric hospitals, reading books to children who couldn't talk back, holding the hands of mothers who sat in the very same pit of helplessness she once knew. Sometimes she would tell them about Jacob, not as a man necessarily, but as a moment. A whisper, a presence, Asterisk Elena, too, grew with a quiet kind of wisdom rare in children her age. She didn't remember much from those days, just fragments of light and sound, the lull of her mother's voice, and a warmth that wrapped around her when everything else was cold and dark. She never heard what Jacob said, but she always felt that whatever it was meant for her soul, not her ears. Asterisk at school, Elena was different. She wasn't loud or overly cheerful, but there was a gentleness in her that made people lean closer when she spoke. She didn't fight for attention, but somehow, people noticed her anyway. When a new kid sat alone in the cafeteria, she was the first to pull up a chair. When a teacher looked overwhelmed, she stayed after class to stack books or erase the board. She wasn't trying to repay a debt. It was just her way of whispering back into the world. Asterisk one autumn afternoon, Rosa received a letter in the mail. It had no return address. Inside was a single photograph, an old black and white image of a younger Jacob standing in front of a sunflower field, holding a small wooden sign that read, "Every living thing needs to be spoken to, even broken things." Asterisk, there was no explanation, no note, just the image. Asterisk Rosa wept again, not the way she had wept in the hospital, but with the full-body sobs that come when sorrow and wonder meet. She framed the photograph and placed it in their living room. It became a quiet symbol in their home, and guests always asked about it. Rosa never told the full story to just anyone. She waited. She listened. And only when she sensed a heart in need did she share it. Asterisk as time passed, the story of Elena's miracle became something of a family legend. On some nights, when the power flickered and candles were lit, Rosa would tell the tale again, her voice trembling slightly, always ending with the same sentence. He didn't heal her with science. He healed her with something we've forgotten how to trust presence. Asterisk years later, Elena stood on a stage in front of a small crowd at a local community center. She was 17 now, and the glow of youth mixed with something ancient in her gaze. She was there to receive a volunteer award for her work with terminally ill children. She wore a pale yellow dress, and as she walked up to the podium, she clutched a small jar of wild honey in her hand. The crowd applauded, but she waited for silence before she spoke. Asterisk, I don't remember what the man said to me, she began, softly, but I remember what it felt like. It felt like being seen when you're invisible. It felt like someone whispering to the part of me that was still alive, even when everything else wasn't. He didn't ask for anything. He just believed something was still there, and that was enough. Asterisk, she paused. The room was silent, heavy with emotion. Asterisk, there are people around you who may look like they've given up, she continued. But what they might really be waiting for is a whisper. Asterisk Rosa sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly, tears running freely down her cheeks. Asterisk after the event, a woman approached Elena, holding her toddler in her arms. The child had been recently diagnosed with a rare muscle condition. She looked exhausted, terrified. Do you really believe people can come back when everyone else has given up? She asked. Asterisk Elena didn't answer with certainty. She simply nodded and handed the woman the jar of honey she'd been holding. Sometimes, she said, it only takes one person to believe enough for two. Asterisk that night, Rosa and Elena returned home under a silver moon. They lit a candle for Jacob, not because they were sure of who he was or where he had come from, but because they were sure that something larger than reason had touched them both that day. A whisper, a miracle, a seed planted in silence that grew into a life neither of them could have imagined. If this story moved you in any way, if you believe in whispers, in second chances, in kindness that heals, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps more people find light in their darkest moments. And don't forget to subscribe to USA Soul Stories for more real, soul-stirring journeys. Asterisk special request. In the comments, tell. Has someone ever believed in you when you were ready to give up? We want to hear your whisper moment. Asterisk.